Hi, welcome back to Space Thoughts. U.S. Space Command announced yesterday that they detected what they consider to be an anti-satellite weapon test by the Russian Federation back on July 15th. And this was basically, they extrapolated this from information they gathered from space situational awareness sensors, which U.S. has a pretty solid and pretty accurate sensor system. So obviously they were watching what was going on. Now, this involved a spacecraft, Cosmos 2543, and actually that was actually a spacecraft within a larger spacecraft, Cosmos 2542, and one emerged from the other. And I believe this was actually, this spacecraft was actually involved in shadowing a U.S. intelligence satellite back a few months ago. And that was, of course, a big concern by U.S. Space Command as well, and they made a very loud statement that the U.S. wasn't happy about it. So apparently what happened is Cosmos 2543 ejected an object at high velocity from itself. Now, it's from the description of what it sounds, it doesn't sound like this was another spacecraft within a spacecraft, but actually a projectile being emitted from Cosmos 2543, which kind of lends credibility to an idea that this was the test of an ASAT versus a test of some sort of rendezvous capability and such. So obviously U.S. Space Command is really concerned about this, considering this is basically a demonstration of capability to neutralize U.S. space assets in orbit, as opposed to the ASAT test they did a few months ago that was with a ground-based missile. So they can't argue this was basically a missile defense test, because this technology, I don't think, would be very effective against a missile coming up on a ballistic trajectory and re-entering the atmosphere. So apparently, the Russians decided this was a good idea for whatever reasons. A few of them I think I'm going to go into in this video. But overall, this was a co-orbital ASAT, in my opinion. Again, I'm not an expert in the technology of it. I know just enough to make these videos and comment on it. But every indication is this was a co-orbital ASAT, but instead of the satellite itself exploding and destroying another satellite with a shrapnel, it actually uses some sort of projectile mechanism to eject a projectile to potentially impact kinetically another satellite. So why do the Russians do this? And again, I was having a discussion with a colleague earlier today about this. And basically, when it comes to the Russian Federation, even the Soviets from the Cold War days, there's never one real reason why something like this is done. It's usually very multifaceted. And again, you got to think in terms of geopolitics. This isn't about globalism. This is about geopolitics and national interest. So the question is, what national interest does the Russian Federation have in performing a test like this and actually demonstrating a valid ASAT capability? Well, number one, it goes to show it basically could be saber rattling, in a sense, showing the U.S. that in this domain it's not safe. If the Russians really wanted to cause problems, they could interfere with our satellites kinetically like this. So in that sense, it is rattling of sabers. I've heard the term shot across the bow. That's probably another area. Two, it could be demonstrating the capability to say, hey, to try and lure the U.S. back to the negotiating table to hammer out an ASAT agreement. Now, I have huge problems with ASAT agreements. They've been tried for decades. They never got anywhere because they're hard to verify in most instances. And really, when the shooting starts, all these agreements are going to go to pot anyways. And I see them more as a lawfare instrument more than actually a legitimate, hey, let's not go there with this type of technology. However, I mean, in this case, they may have overplayed their hand a little bit, because it's going to be hard to say, well, we want an anti-satellite weapons agreement, but we just tested an anti-satellite weapons capability. So that doesn't really give them a lot of leverage in that area. And I think it gives the U.S. another opportunity to come in and burn down any efforts to really restart the whole space weapons debate in the UN. Again, back in 2018, the U.S. basically went into Geneva at the Conference of Disarmament and basically obliterated the Russian-Chinese efforts to ban space weapons, including the PPWT, by pointing out activities by both states with regards to anti-satellite weapon testing. And again, there was a follow-on meeting in New York where basically the U.S. reinforced that and basically stomped out any other, any glowing embers of the space weapons debate. So fundamentally, that's dead, and I think the Russians and the Chinese have been trying to get started again, and this might be an effort. But again, performing a test like this really, I think, is going to backfire in that consideration, because it says we're really not serious about it. They had the capability, and they're probably not going to give it up willingly. I think it's also a way to, poke the U.S. again. And again, this is the game of geopolitics, and part of geopolitics is poking other states and irritating them, and giving them something else to think about. Right now, the U.S. has a lot on its plate between tensions flaring up with China right now, with civil unrest, with the continuing pandemic, and of course, it's an election year right now, and the domestic political environment is very volatile. So this is just another problem, or another thing for the U.S. to be concerned about, to be looking at. And of course, that gets to the idea, is this a distraction of some sort? So in other words, are we so busy focusing on what the Russians are doing in space that we're not looking elsewhere? And this kind of plays into the whole role of the alliance between the People's Republic of China and the Russian Federation. Basically, the enemy, my enemy is my friend. So, basically they are working together to make life difficult for the U.S. And one way of doing that is distracting the U.S. in one domain while things go on in another. One interesting aspect is back on July 17th, 2 days after this test occurred, the Russian President Vladimir Putin announced a combat readiness drills, basically where all Russian forces were gearing up to test fast response combat readiness. Incidentally, to that, the U.S. responded, and several other countries responded by sending ships into the Black Sea to basically send the message that if we want to stop you, we can stop you. And understand, geopolitically and strategically, the Black Sea is very important to the Russian Federation, because it's the only cold water port the Russian Navy has to get out into the open seas. And if you bottle that up, essentially you are preventing the Russian Navy from getting out into the open seas and basically keeping them contained. And the Black Sea has always been a high point of contention between the West and the Russian Federation. And of course, basically the idea is these are free and open oceans, much in the way space is free and open. And this is, and I'm kind of wondering, and I'm not trying to connect dots or anything, but I'm looking at this consideration. Is this exercise somehow related to this ASAT test? In other words, was this ASAT test kind of an opening in one domain for activities, for military activities by the Russian Federation in other domains? And again, you got to understand strategically that we can't, being Westerners, we tend to think like Westerners. We can't think like, but the Russian Federation and the People's Republic of China, they think differently. Now, the comment's been made, well, and I've heard this comment before by U.S. leaders, but military leaders, that if a war or conflict starts in space, everybody loses. I don't believe that, because I think you have to define how, what is winning and what is losing. And I think from the perspective of preemption and from Chinese deterrence doctrine, a kinetic ASAT strike would actually make sense to them, even though it would cause a debris field. It would probably send a very strong psychological message that, that further hostilities probably wouldn't be a good idea and might stop a full-blown war from going on, while at the same time reaching their own geopolitical goals. So understand that's, that's some of the thinking that goes into these things and with these ASAT counter space weapon type things. Another thing actually that I thought about really plays into the Russian-Chinese relationship is that it's very tenuous, and the Russians and the PRC have always had a very contentious relationship. And my philosophy has been, geopolitically, eventually they're going to turn on each other. This relationship they have won't go on forever, and they will eventually turn on each other. From the Russian Federation's perspective, it can't look weak in the eyes of the People's Republic of China, because right now the Russian Federation needs a PRC at this point. But at the same time, they don't want to look weak, because if they look weak in the eyes of the PRC might say, well, here's an opportunity, and turn on them prematurely. So that's a consideration, and having an ASAT test like this to actually rankle the U.S. or at least get the U.S. upset could potentially play into a larger picture of looking strong in the eyes of their ally. And this goes for as well as for exercises that the Russians have been performing with aircraft flying near our airspace, and actions on the high seas as well. This is all an effort to basically look strong. Part of it is to look strong in the eyes of the PRC. And again, I emphasize, there's probably not one particular specific reason why the Russians performed this ASAT test. Again, it's multifaceted. And from a policy perspective, it's, you got to look at all sides of this, and it's like I said, it's multifaceted, and you can't just say, well, this is the one reason in particular. There are probably several reasons all playing in this game. Consider this game isn't just chess. It's basically three-dimensional chess. And oh, by the way, we're also playing the game of Go as well, all at the same time. So this is a very complex geopolitical game that is going on. There's been some things how the U.S. should respond. I've seen some comments. Well, we got to basically send them a message to, or they're going to think we're weak, or we're not going to be able to deter them. Again, this gets back to the idea of what is deterrence, and I think deterrence has to evolve from beyond the mad days to really address the new strategic environment. And I'm not sure that a response, a one-for-one response, even if we had the capability, is necessary or would even be advisable, in the sense that you don't want to show all your cards of what you have. Sometimes an adversary will try to trick you into showing what your true capabilities are by provoking. And I think in this instance, that could be a very good thing. Basically provoking this type of demonstration, they're trying to elicit a response to see what kind of capabilities we have in this area and what type of response it is. Again, I'm not a policy maker, and I don't have all the information. So a lot of this is basically trying to put together some of the pieces that are out there to try and get an idea of what the full picture is. And again, with the Russians, it's very multifaceted. Another consideration is that about a month ago, the defense space strategy was revealed by the Department of Defense, and part of that, the overall theme is what we call space superiority. So, in a sense, the Russian Federation could be saying, okay, this is our answer to your claims of space superiority, or your policy of space superiority. Basically, how are you going to answer that? So, again, what I want to understand, this is a concerning test. However, nothing was destroyed. No U.S. assets were attacked, or any other nation's space assets were attacked. But clearly, a message was sent. Okay, we had this capability. I think the reasons are basically a lot of them. But on the other hand, I think they may have overplayed their hand, especially if they're trying to get back to the negotiating table and use as a soft power leverage. Because how can you basically morally stand up or legitimately stand up to the international community and say, we think we should put a ban on these weapons or these types of devices or technologies, when they basically just demonstrated that they have the capability to do so. So those are a few of my preliminary thoughts on this ASAT test. And yes, I'm going to call it an ASAT test because everything looks like this is what it is. And if anything more develops, I will definitely get right back on here and do another video and kind of fill in the gaps of some of my hypothesis or theories, and try and basically recant some of my theories if further information proves that they were wrong. So again, have a great day, and I'll talk to you next time.